My name is Karen Siebert, and I'm a registered dental hygienist. I've practiced for quite some time, and I found that often being simple in our systems is really the best way to go and the best way to get return on our investment for our productivity improvements. A few little small tweaks and changes in our systems and technology, and you'll be on your way to more efficient, productive office. Infection control is sometimes considered a time and resource drain and kind of boring to top it off, right? And sometimes it's called the necessary evil in practice. But tonight I really want to look at this with you and see why it doesn't have to be such a drain. It can actually add to your practice productivity with a really nice return on investment. Before we get any further, I'd like to thank Viva Learning for providing the opportunity to talk about systems for your offices, and to Mila Professional for providing the educational grant. My hope tonight is that the program will start you thinking about your own office systems, particularly instrument reprocessing and infection control that you can change in your office if needed to align more with what your philosophy and practice is. Our objectives tonight, our businesses consist of system after system. We're always checking things to see what's running correctly and what's not. And trying to run these with maximum efficiency can really boost productivities for our practice. So we're going to look at how we assess office systems for maximum efficiency, and then move into specific reprocessing systems that meet our infection control standards set by the CDC. Technology has advanced in almost every area of our practices, and I think you'd agree we're using our computers more and more. And infection control hasn't really been left behind. There's some great new technology that we can talk about tonight. Things that streamline our procedures and are really valuable to our practice in that way. Before we look at specific systems, there's some basic philosophical questions to ask ourselves. Like, how and when should I invest in office system technology? What kind of ROI can I expect? And that would be return on investment. And how and when should I invest in these office system technologies? These are all really big questions that we need to ask ourselves when we're considering upgrading any kind of system in our office. When investing in the practice systems, revisit your practice vision and your strategic plan. Remember those things we pull out of the drawer every once in a while? But does this purchase you're going to make support your vision? Does the overall strategy plan work for your practice? And does it meet up with your long-term goals? And when you have your answers to those questions, then you can consider how that technology might improve the inner workings of your practice system if you are to add to it. And here on the screen are a few of the crucial systems that we look at in our practice. Communication is probably huge. I probably should have made that circle twice as big. Our treatment protocols, inventory, infection control, all those are important pieces that fit together. And knowing your strategic plan will lead you to choosing technologies that align with your vision and really ultimately simplify your practice approach to productivity. And each of these really does depend on the other and plays that important role in your practice productivity. You're the leader in your practice, so it's up to you to really carefully assess these categories and manage those systems and base decisions on the evidence. One of the biggest things is our communication systems, and really marketing is the communication umbrella for our practice. For example, do you have a website in place? Because face it, patients aren't really picking up the yellow pages and paging through and looking at the little ad that's placed in there anymore. They don't pick up the phone and call without having done some due diligence and internet research. And if our practice website's not in place and we don't communicate that practice vision, patients are less likely to really choose our practice. It doesn't look like we really know where we are and what kind of practice we offer. So the practice website is great for sharing our vision, but it's also a great place to promote the things we do, like our investments, such as purchases in technology. We can add informative pieces about cutting-edge instrument reprocessing systems, for example, that your office has implemented. You can add photos of the high-tech automated washer and the instrument sterilizer in the reprocessing room, and add a reference or two and a little blurb about why the guidelines from the CDC are important and that you've looked at the evidence and that's why you've chosen these technologies. Another place you can do this is in an office newsletter. They're a great place to also promote your technologies that you've invested in. You can write again a little short educational piece about why we follow the CDC recommendations and why you implement the instrument reprocessing system that you have. That can really be a huge practice builder. And I know as a patient myself, when I become one, I really want to know that the practice I go to has the most current technology for sterilizing the instruments that are going to be used in my mouth. When you start really thinking about it that way, or if it's being used in your child's mouth, a practice that's not afraid to share its sterilization system can really build some trust that leads to referrals and very happy patients. So our communication strategy should include websites and newsletters. That'll direct patients to the phone to help increase the amount of appointments that they're being made. Anybody remember a Rolodex? It wasn't terribly long ago that this is how we handled our ReCare systems, but these are really long gone. But back to those basic questions for assessing technology implementation. When you're considering a ReCare communication system, do you ask yourself which system fits into your practice philosophy? What works for your patient-based needs? Along with, your own philosophy will really help you pick up on which system is going to fit in for your office. So communicating with our patients is obviously important. And we have so many great new technologies to address this. All those cloud-based communication systems that really simplify tracking and adding touches to our communication, like sending birthday wishes and holiday greetings. And those are all great if that type of communication fits into your practice branding and philosophy. And a lot of those, too, are great because they integrate right into the dental software that you may already have in place. And that's an added bonus for tracking treatment needs for our patients. So we have really come a long way from the Rolodex and the paper appointment book, that's for sure. So we have this great software now. I know I've worked with Dentrix and Eaglesoft, and they integrate with so many of those cloud-based communication systems. And once you've chosen those systems to implement into your practice, one of the key things that I would implore you as a team member all my life is to not skimp out on the team buy-in and training. When we add a new technology in a practice, having team support is the quickest way to gain ground and get your return on investment. When your team understands how that technology fits into your philosophy and vision and what it will do for them, we can really help you grow your practice. Then there's social media. We have that as well now. Do you tweet? I personally am not much of a tweeter, but I do enjoy Facebook because it's a really nice way to share some pictures with family and friends and other practitioners I know around the country. I'm sure you do too. Patients do look for social media presence, and they love the steady communication. They do love helpful tips and human interest stories, and it helps them get to know you and your practice philosophy. So designating some time for your office management team to spend time managing that electronic communication systems is vital to communicating with our patients and gaining their trust and finding a way that they enjoy communicating with us. So when we implement the variety to our communication methods, a patient's bound to find a way that works for them and fits into their life, and then it's a win-win for both the practice and the patient. So clear communication of practice philosophy and ample training for our teams are really essential for successfully integrating any new systems that we choose to bring into our practice. Now we know when we take the time to communicate with our patients through a customized treatment plan, that patient is more likely to say yes and understand their needs and for the treatment that we're presenting. You know, so many offices spend a lot of time training their team members on treatment protocol that complements their philosophy, and that is terrific. It really will bring that patient into a comfortable zone and understand that you care about them and care about the treatment that they are receiving. And just like we spend the time on training our patients about, our team members about the communication for treatment protocol presentation, we need to train our teams on our new technologies so that we can also receive some return on investment in those. One of the mistakes I've seen practices make in thinking that minimal inventory is going to mean profit for the practice. So when they go to put together their inventory and purchasing plan, maybe they hold back on ordering enough to really keep the practice running efficiently and stress-free. So what happens is we run out of some of those products that we really like to have or that help us in our treatment, and we have to rush order, which can be more expensive, or we work without it. And depending on what that is that we're missing, it could really result in lower quality care or even our inability to complete a procedure. And that can really lead to much more of a production loss. So one of the pearls I'd like to hopefully send with you is that I've seen practices successfully grow by putting the team departments in charge of their own budgets. Just like a home budget, that forces the team member to take responsibility for managing the supplies that they want to have in their area of the practice in an efficient and really consistent way so you know what's going on. And that avoids the pitfalls of ordering things on the fly. As a hygienist, I have really learned to manage my instrument inventory that way. I've set a budget and I like to learn how to manage it. And then that way I take some ownership for how successful the practice is. When I want to buy something new for the dental hygiene department, for example, I try to bring forward evidence-based research and present it basically like a business proposal before purchasing something new, because I have responsibility to my office and our practice philosophy to save money in that area and be sure to bring the best return on investment I can. So if you really want to encourage loyalty, give this a try in your practice, and I would love to know, how it works for you. So when it comes to infection control systems, these really have a lot of the same questions we're going to ask. Sometimes we're really good at having certain systems in place, and then other ones kind of fall by the wayside because, face it, we are very busy taking care of our patients. But one of the keys to good system decisions, like I mentioned in a couple of the other areas, is basing choices on evidence-based articles and sources. So if you're changing a system such as reprocessing instruments that we're going to talk about tonight in the office, it's important to look at reliable sources for that information on the choices that you're thinking about making. I know personally I like to look for the evidence-based research that I can find on the Cochrane collaboration. The American Dental Association evidence-based dentistry website is also a good place. And one of probably my gold standard is going to the CDC 2008 guidelines for infection control. That way I know I'm going right to the source, because many times sales representatives will bring information into our offices, and it's nice to hear about all the new things that are out. It's tempting to really rely on their word alone about some product or system that we were looking at, rather than doing our own due diligence and looking into the evidence-based research. But I would encourage you all to listen to their information and then go ahead and do a little bit of reading on your own through some of those quality sources so that you feel comfortable that you are picking something that does fit into your office philosophy and you don't waste money. This is often a something that people think. Infection control is just a big budget vacuum, and honestly, I've always kind of thought that too. But now with the newer technologies that are out there, I think I see ways that we can bring it into our practice and actually have it be a productivity enhancement. So what if we have excellent systems in place with advanced technology? What could that do for our practices? Since all our systems work together for that maximum productivity, infection control is no exception in that, of course. So just like the technology that we have available in the communication arena, all the different programs that are available to communicate with our patients, infection control has advanced, and it includes some multitasking tools and technologies that can really simplify and the reprocessing protocol and bring about some return on investment. And really, it doesn't seem possible to put the words productivity and infection control into the same sentence, but we've come into an age where I think we can start doing that. The key here is products that meet those high standards of the CDC guidelines for infection control, but they also multitask in their approach. Some of the cutting-edge systems in the marketplace that I have seen recently are, for example, some surface disinfectant systems that have really high effectiveness, but are cut down to the one step and are using less toxic ingredients. Yet they still have the 1-minute kill time for TB and parvovirus, and we don't have to go spray, wipe, spray anymore. It is simply a wipe and let the solution sit for a minute, and we'll be able to kill. What a big time saver that's been for me, since we have such short turnover time between patients. Some of the cutting edge tools that we've seen come out include instrument cassettes. Those are only a little over 20 years old, and these hard-working containers have several benefits that really improve infection control systems. They can help by lengthening instrument life, and they can assure full clean prior to sterilization. They're really serious workhorses. And some of the cutting-edge technology that we've seen includes automated washers that combine the pre-soak through the cleaning and drying steps, really, of reprocessing into just a couple of simple steps. The time savings that we can have when we go from 8 or 9 steps way down to 3 is huge when we're looking at that small amount of time between patients again. This also simplifies team training, and when you're trying to be consistent training your team members, this is a major bonus to be able to train someone on 3 or 4 steps rather than 8 or 9. So what are we trying to accomplish here? We've got cleaning to do, disinfecting, and sterilizing. We both clean and disinfect surfaces, but we do not sterilize surfaces, of course. Our equipment we clean and disinfect as well, such as our chairs, our consoles. And our instruments are interesting because they need to go through much more than anything else in our practices. We need to get them all the way through sterilization because they are Class 1 medical devices that enter the tissue in a patient's body, especially when we're speaking about scalers, for example. Cleaning has to be done in order to remove that bioburden on instruments that challenges the sterilization process. So that's one of those goals that can be very difficult to accomplish. This takes our staff helping us out with these systems. If we have a written room turnover protocol, it really helps keep the communication consistent through our team, and anyone within the office is able to jump in, help out, and accomplish cleaning a room, for example, and getting the next patient into the chair if we have a consistent written room turnover protocol. It helps us in training new team members. We also can follow the CDC guidelines for standard precautions if we add that into our written turnover protocol. I would recommend using sources such as the CDC, and there's a great organization called OSAP, OSAP.org, that I would highly recommend taking a look at their website if you never have. One thing that helps teams, no matter how small or large your team is if you designate an infection control guru for your office. Choose someone who's very interested in it and who would like to help you accomplish consistency and high level of infection control. Some of the other things that you're going to need to do that are cross-training your entire staff and wearing their personal protective equipment. Having these personal protective items available for your staff at all times is key to consistency in high-level surface disinfection and instrument reprocessing. Recommend having utility gloves available at all times so that you minimize having any chemicals absorbed through the regular treatment gloves, or also to minimize instrument sticks. Eye protection is super important, as well as a mask being worn. And sometimes we're so busy that it's not easy to put on all those new PPEs while we're doing that room turnover. But if we think about it as not only protecting ourselves, but our next patients so that we don't end up with the contaminants on ourselves while we are treating a patient, that might help us move to be sure to take care and wear our PPEs at all times. Now, some of the things we use in practice need to be disposable, and it's important to follow research-based recommendations on these items that need to be disposable. This is a little example of a study that I found in the British Dental Journal, and it found that even with an automated washer system, organic debris was left behind on endophiles. They are so tiny and small, and with so many little tiny places for bioburden to accumulate, that it's impossible to remove 100%. So the recommendation across many articles is to make endophiles single use. Other things that we want to consider as disposables are things like saliva ejectors and prophyangles. And when we have our designated disposables and yet have our reprocessing protocols well set, then we are able to control our costs and lead us to more productivity. And one of the ways that we can choose what we have designated as a disposable is to take a look at those CDC recommendations and follow those. Now, I've already mentioned both of these products a little bit as we've talked. These are both hard-working, multitasking tools that we have available that are newer technology in infection control. Reading evidence-based articles that recommend tools that can really streamline our practice is really what I would recommend, and that'll have a positive return on investment for your practice. Now, I have a little poll question for you. And I'd like to ask you, how much time can utilizing a cassette system save in your best estimation per procedure? So I'm going to turn the poll on here. Your choices are no time at all, 1 minute, or 5 minutes. So I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and add your 2 cents in here. Got a pretty good majority going here. I'll give our team a little more time. All right, I think we have pretty much covered those who are going to vote, and let's close the poll and show you some results here. So here we go. We have votes for no time at all saved. We just have 10% of the votes. 1 minute, 21%, and 5 minutes, 67.3%. The estimate is that it will save 5 minutes or so per procedure when you implement cassettes into practice. One of the reasons is because they are such multitasking tools. They are something that can help protect team members, protect instruments from damage, and separate instruments for best cleaning results. They are such important pieces of equipment because they can do all of these things together. One of the things that I love about cassettes is that they provide a way to transport instruments from the treatment room to the reprocessing center without handling the sharp instruments themselves. You know, as I said earlier, periodontal instruments are medical devices that are used to enter the body, the tissue, and when we do that, those instruments become contaminated with bloodborne pathogens. By enclosing the instruments prior to transporting them to the reprocessing area, the healthcare workers in our office minimize the risk of exposure to those contaminants and also exposure to the possibility for an instrument stick. And we know that if you have an instrument stick, that leads to a trip to the hospital for blood testing. And nobody has time for that. The other very important part of a cassette, it really saves us a lot of money in the long run and improves our treatment and care, is that it protects our instruments from bending and breaking. Periodontal instruments are fairly fragile, and when they're tossed together to rattle around in, say, an ultrasonic without a cassette, we do risk bending and breaking tips of the instruments. And bends are especially tricky in instrumentation because they're not always obvious, and they can lead to ergonomic challenges when the working end angulation's been bent out of balance. And that leads to the possibility of burnishing calculus even. It makes that more likely. So it has more effects than you would imagine. When you're purchasing a cassette, there are a couple things to look for. You want to look for one with adequate ventilation so the cleaning fluid can reach all the areas of the instruments. You also want something that's really easy to open and close, that has good hinge closure. That assures that the instruments will remain contained all the way from the operatory through to the cleaning and sterilization processes, because it's going to remain closed all the way through the point of opening it until the next patient if you're using an automated washer, for example. And then we've got that nice benefit of being able to protect the healthcare worker themselves from any instrument sticks when we use the cassettes with the proper hinging. You know, cassettes can save that enormous amount of time. 5 minutes can mean an awful lot. So cassettes have been such a big savings for me. I have used them to sort my procedures and code them. I'll have separate cassettes for scaling and root planing, for example, versus your general healthy patient that I'm going to see on, say, a 6-month recare visit. When we don't have to sort those instruments and determine what packaging that they go into, we're eliminating a lot of contact time. It's also much easier to find a particular instrument. We don't have to search through dusty drawers and cabinets for them, for example. Each cassette can be organized to hold a certain procedure's instruments, like I said, and it really can make a huge difference for storage as well. Wrapping our cassettes is required, and a lot of times that's a question whether we can use cassettes and send them through just as bare metal. But it is required to remain sterile to wrap our cassettes in some sort of wrapping. Now there's paper wrapping available, and you can see that on the cassettes that are wrapped and on this shelf down here. This on the left-hand side is a reusable fabric, a special fabric made for reuse during the sterilization procedure. I have some of these and I really like them. I feel like I'm really being much more eco-friendly using them. I also like when we can store them in a cabinet that is accessible from the hallway for putting the instruments into, and then accessible from the treatment room on the other side to set our trays up very efficiently and quickly. It just makes life much more organized, and I feel like I have more time to focus on patients when I'm able to use a cassette system. Another thing that I really love to prevent and have available to me is a place to store our needles when they're in use. If there are many cassettes that have cap holders built right into them. And this is a real safety feature when we have this available. When that cap has rolled around to the other side of the tray and we're searching away for it, it's much harder to keep track of where the other end of the needle is. So it minimizes the possibility of needle sticks during patient treatment procedures. Now the picture here shows that exposed needle standing straight up. I would never recommend that. Be sure to remove the needle from the upright position when it's separated for the syringe and ready to discard in a sharps container. Cassettes, when we first add up the investment, are an investment. So you do want to think through, is this what's right for my practice? But ask yourself these questions. How often are we replacing our instruments now? And if you have tracked the life of your instruments, then you've got a great comparison. But you may even be able to tell yourself whether you have noticed replacing based on bends and breaks and wear, that you feel like it happens a little bit too soon for the time that's passed since you last purchased instruments. Because aside from the safety and organizational features of a cassette, you can extend the life of your hand instruments, and that's a true benefit to containing them in a secure cassette. I had the advantage of using cassettes for probably the past 10 years of my career, and I can tell you, even though I hadn't tracked it exactly, I'm fairly certain that my stainless steel instruments lasted much longer in those cassettes than they had in any other practice when I hadn't been using them. I would recommend, I wish I had thought, to track the longevity of my hand instruments back in the day, but of course I did not. I would recommend doing that, and then you can really have a true test and numbers to quantify your return on investment. One of a very nice advancement in technology is the revolution of the automated instrument washer. These are very popular in Europe and around the world, and I know we have many people from all over the world here tonight. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with automated washers. In the United States, they do not tend to have gained as much ground yet, but I expect that they will based on the research that is available about their viability and their efficiency for a practice. One of the great things about them is they are able to streamline several steps of the reprocessing system into just a couple of steps. And we're going to look at what steps and benefits this technology has for the modern dental practice. Like I said, anything that is a multitasking piece of equipment is going to bring you a better return on investment and some productivity for your office. Most smaller dental offices in the United States have traditionally used ultrasonic cleaners, like I mentioned a minute ago, for the pre-sterilization cleaning step. And they do a really good job of removing bioburden. But there are several rules that really need to be followed. There's several breaches in protocol that are easy to have happen, especially when we're in such a hurry. Especially things like being able to soak the instruments immediately prior to use, to loosen or before they even get into ultrasonic so that they can loosen the bioburden. So many offices don't have the space or the time or the ability to do that, that sometimes that bioburden can get hardened on and make it a difficult job for the ultrasonic to fully remove it. in the time that the instruments are in the ultrasonic. You also need to be sure not to overfill the ultrasonic. There needs to be plenty of room for the solution to surround the instruments themselves and break up that bioburden with the ultrasonic wavelengths. Then there are the steps beyond the ultrasonic, such as thoroughly rinsing and air drying those cassettes or the instruments themselves. Many practices are in an awful big hurry and the instruments don't get dried, and that challenges the sterilization process by adding more steam to the process. And all these steps can be really time-consuming for our team members. And they add a step of potential exposure to contaminants as well. So an automated washer combines these many steps and takes several of the contaminant exposure potentials away from the team. And the other nice thing is they don't have to be babysat. You can set them, and they're often running without another thought until the cycle ends, and then you're ready to bag. So to understand there are many benefits, let's take a look at what we're cleaning, because we do have a lot of different instruments and types of metals that we're working with these days, and look at what the benefits are to the automated washers and the cleaning method. So when you're trying to determine what method might suit your needs, let's look at what we're putting into the cassette and what we're cleaning. Technology has really afforded us so many different metals to work with. Some of them need a little more TLC than others, and it's best to check with the manufacturer to evaluate which systems are most compatible. With an automated washer, we'll be using an alkaline detergent, and that's going to facilitate the cleaning during the washer cycle. The key to automated washers also is the quality of water during the rinse. It has to be monitored to make sure there's no chlorides or silicates present. And if they are, there is a chance that we may see some rust or some pitting even on the instruments. If the water's not at the correct softness, a water softener has to be added, or a white residue might also appear. These are not things that are difficult to overcome, and I know, for example, the Miele company does pre-test water, and they're very proactive before installing a automated washer to make sure that that system is going to be successful before installing it. So if a water filter is needed, then it's able to be put in, and then you avoid all of those problems to begin with. So these are some of the varieties of metals that we're using in dentistry today, and the quality of those metals does have an impact on productivity. You know, many times offices will consider the scalars, for example, just to be taking off calculus, but that's not really so much the case. They are entering the tissues in the body and need to be very high quality to maintain the sharp edge that they need and to make sure that there aren't any cracks or breaks in them. So, and also for the reprocessing, the higher quality metals that we have anti-corrosive qualities built right into them. That'll help them resist wear and corrosion during reprocessing. And you know, if you can, save time and money by purchasing the higher quality instruments. They will generally exceed the industry standards and have built-in anti-corrosive qualities. We also have to worry about the seal between the handle and the working end. If that becomes a very microscopic opening, we have the chance for microbes and ultrasonic solution, other contaminants to enter that area and cross-contaminate among patients. So the harder the metal, the less frequent the sharpening and the more time for patient treatment, and you'll find that with the higher quality metals. But with each metal, you're going to want to follow the recommended cleaning and storage procedures to reach their longest life that you possibly can. And each has certain sensitivities to chemicals and storage procedures that'll lengthen their life. And we're going to look at some different chemicals that affect different metals on the next slide here. One of the things we're going to keep in mind is that we want to be cognizant of the pH of the water and the quality of the water that's used also to take care of these. So these are some of the metals that we use these days in practice: titanium, carbon steel, stainless steel, some aluminum, not much really. XP Technology is a special proprietary metal that is titanium infused to a substrate metal that creates a much harder surface and maintains its edge much longer than stainless steel in scalars. Each of these has their own different chemicals that they're not so compatible with, and as you can see, the list does vary a little bit here to there. Miele recommends that washer disinfectors are for all instruments that have heat resistance up to 95 degrees Celsius, or that's equal to 203 degrees Fahrenheit, by the way. The instruments must also have corrosion resistance when they're heated and exposed to an alkaline environment. Generally, that means that high-quality stainless steel instruments, hollow instruments, cassettes made of stainless steel or resin, and hinged instruments are going to be just fine. A few metals are not recommended to run in an automated washer. Aluminum is one of them. Nickel, carbon, carbide steel as well. So the few things that we use in those, maybe you'd have a small ultrasonic off to the side to take care of those. Anything with plastic involved in it, any plastic instrument, needs to be able to withstand high temperatures. So you'd have to find out from that instrument company whether it does or not. Some obvious instruments that we would avoid putting in automated washers are the same ones we would avoid putting in an ultrasonic solution. We sure wouldn't dunk something with fiber optics or a handpiece into liquid. Same with burrs and drill bits and grinders. One other caveat for automated washers is that mirrors are not compatible with automated washers. Ultimately, though, Miele, for example, recommends checking with the instrument manufacturer for advice on compatibility with the washer disinfector systems, and then you'll always be on the safe side. So this is our typical room turnover. There are 8 steps from the start or from the end of patient treatment when we say goodbye to our patient to the time we package for sterilization. And so it's no wonder that there's an occasional error. There's definitely potential for human error or stealth mechanical issues, or an occasional blob of bioburden can definitely remain through some of these oopses that can be made. Plus, with 8 steps, it's very hard to speed that up much, especially when we're dealing with the important job of removing that bioburden for the next use on another patient. All these steps need to be very precisely followed when we're caring for Class 1 medical devices that enter the body's tissue. So I have one more poll question for you. How many of the steps in the typical reprocessing routine can be eliminated, do you think, by implementing automated washer technology? 1, 3, or 5 steps? So I'll start the poll here, and you can choose how many steps you think might be eliminated if we implement automated washer technology in practice. Everybody's making decisions pretty quickly here. Give it another few seconds. Okay, looks like we've pretty much gotten the votes we're going to get from our group, so I'm going to close the poll and show you the results. Pretty close call here between 3 steps and 5 steps. Everyone thought it was more than 1, that's for sure. So let's return to the slides here. We can actually cut out about 5 steps when we go to an automated washer. The cassette utilization and the automated washer together can eliminate those 5 steps, and it just becomes a big time saver. And that saved time translates to more patient care time and translates to increased production. And who doesn't want that, right? So while wearing our utility gloves, we simply close the cassette in the operatory, we transport it to the washer, and we put it into the washer. This saves time and danger of gathering those instruments by hand, transporting them in open trays, pre-soaking, hand delivery, removing them from the ultrasonic, rinsing. The cassettes are going to hold in the automated washer until the automated washer is actually full. That can be and they'll hold up to 6 hours before the cycle runs. That always ran counterintuitive to what I thought. I always wanted to get that bioburden off right away, but because of the powerful wash cycle, the instruments don't have to pre-soak to loosen the bioburden, and that saves time, money, you name it. It's going to save a lot. It saves a lot of potential for instrument sticks, and we're going to save on solutions for soaking. Once that automated washer is full, we're going to choose the disinfection vario cycle so we can add some disinfection into the cycle, and we're going to press start. We don't even have to think about it again. Add the 10-minute optional drying cycle because that's going to add that dryness that we're going to need just to package them right away. After the cycle runs, the instruments are disinfected too, which is a completely different concept than what we have from an ultrasonic. So because of the disinfection cycle, we cut down on the potential for cross-contamination after the cleaning cycle, and that's a great benefit for our staff. I have a question here. Can you still utilize the flash sterilizer for instruments you need more quickly? By flash sterilizer, I'm familiar with a Statim. I'm assuming that you mean a 15-minute sterilizer. And yes, I would absolutely imagine you could. You could put them through the automatic washer, and when they're done, then go ahead and put them into the Statim. That would make sense. Oh, thank you. Yes, you confirmed that. Yes, you could absolutely. How you end up sterilizing them after that really should just be fine. So as you can see, the washer disinfectors of today really provide this great consistent clean. They're going to reduce the sharps potential and keeping our staff and patients safer too because of the lack of cross-contamination potential. I do have to throw this in there because, as absurd as this looks, there seems to be some confusion about the difference between a kitchen dishwasher and an automated dishwasher that has been cleared by the FDA as a medical device. I actually had a course that I gave last week, and people in the audience talked about how their dentist had purchased a kitchen dishwasher instead of an FDA-approved automated washer. And the difference there is that there's no guarantee that a dishwasher is going to be able to remove bioburden. Hot water has been shown to denature and set blood rather than remove it. And an automated washer is pre-programmed to run at cool temperatures until all the protein bioburden has been removed. So the moral of the story is that all automated washers are FDA-approved medical devices. They've been tested to make sure that they meet the standards that are required of a medical device. Kitchen dishwashers have not. So I would highly recommend avoiding that and sticking with an FDA-approved medical device, such as an automated washer. And you could, kitchen dishwashers, we don't know if you could have damage to your instruments as well. So ask yourself a couple of questions. Are your instruments reliably cleaned with your current system? Is your ultrasonic too small for the volume of instruments that you have in your practice? Do you have a pre-soak available? Is there enough space to have pre-soak, ultrasonic, and space to dry before packaging? If you don't feel that you're confident that you have the space for that, an automated washer might be a good idea. You get a lot out of that 24 inches that it takes to install it, and it can really save you a lot. Now I have another question here. Even if the microscopic bioburden remains, is proper sterilization effective? Not technically. No, we would still want to make sure that that bioburden is removed. However, at this point, we have no way of checking other than visually, right? That's been pretty much our gold standard. So unless we're going to put our instruments under the microscope, we're going to have a pretty close to, I'm sure it's a 99.99% kill, but there probably still would be some risk that there would be microscopic bioburden that could cause infection for someone. So, we're never 100% for anything, and I guess this would also hold true. The capacity is very nice for an automated washer. You can load it up all morning, run it over lunchtime, take the instruments out, package them, and run them, and then load them all afternoon and run them also. It's just great for the efficiency of running many instruments at once. And according to the CRA Foundation, when they tested the Miele cycle, including disinfection and drying, the time, it took under 1 minute, just under 1 hour to complete the cycle. So it was about 58 minutes to be exact. Oh, so Yvonne, you're asking, so is inspection after unwrapping for a procedure recommended? Oh, I always recommend to take a look at your instruments after sterilization, no matter what. We never know, what if we pack them incorrectly? There's always our human error that can go on, so we always want to make sure that we inspect our instruments before using them. Even when we're using the highest level of pre-cleaning we could possibly get to, we still want to make sure we're doing the right thing. One of the things I think is very cool is that we're cutting way back on our water use. Rather than constantly running the sink and rinsing each cassette, we just run that automated washer one time, and that pre-wash cycle runs in that cold water to remove the blood proteins. So we're using very little hot water as well. It's to be very economical. The cool water is used all the way through the neutralizing rinse. So the main cycle runs to remove the bioburden, then we have a neutralizing rinse that's in cool. Finally, once we've had a second rinse after that, an intermediate, the machine is sure that the blood proteins are removed from the instrument, and then it will raise the heat of the disinfectant cycle to get that disinfectant kill as well. Then the drying cycle will run, and your instruments will be ready to package. Baskets such as the one that are shown are also available in case you have things that just don't fit into cassettes. They also have some racks that'll hold hinged instruments that I actually have a picture of right here. You want to run those at in an open state so that there aren't any spots that we can get a little bit of extra moisture to hide in those hinges. The closed instrument won't dry properly, and then it'll increase the corrosion and wear potential. So you always want to run them on a rack like this that keeps them in the open position. So unlike the other pre-sterilization cleaning methods we've had all along, some of the automated washers do have this built-in disinfection cycle that I have mentioned. These will often be called washer disinfectors to distinguish the added feature on these models. This particular picture is of the Miele G7881, just in case you're wondering. It's one of the models that has a built-in disinfection cycle, and it's called the Disinfection Vario program. When we set it, the last 10 minutes of the final rinse cycle rise to that 200 degrees Fahrenheit and add an extra layer of disinfection. And that's unique to this model, and it reduces that microbial load, and it actually boosts the cleaning process to exceed OSHA standards for microbial contamination reduction. So as you're seeing, there are many reasons to incorporate the technologies we've looked at tonight that improve office systems. These can have such a positive effect on our productivity and return on investment. Multitaskers like the cassettes you see here, or the automated washers, such as the one we see here, the Miele G7881, can help us really reduce the steps in our infection control sequence, and it still won't compromise the quality of our care. In fact, with these kind of products that are multitasking, we can really be assured that our practice is well above standard of care that's recommended by the CDC and OSHA. And teamwork is essential when we're implementing these new systems. Your team's going to have a few fundamental questions when something new is brought into the practice. It says that, they're going to ask, what's in it for me? Is there really a need to change things up here? And, oh my gosh, is this going to be difficult to learn? So if you take the time to really talk through these worries together as a team, it'll help build the enthusiasm for that new technology, as well as solidify your general practice philosophy among your team. Plan some effective training and plan several trainings so you have follow-up sessions that you can recap and answer questions that come up once the system's in use. There may be changes to make. You may need to tweak things as you go along, so you definitely want to have some time to regroup and check in with each other. But when the practice takes the time to work together and implement technology like this, it can equal less time focusing on tasks and a lot more time focusing on patient care and providing productive, high-quality treatment. You've got then staff satisfaction generally increases, and that leads to less staff turnover, and we all know that that contributes to productivity. There's no downtime spent searching for the right team member and training them on the new systems over and over and over as we're replacing. So I hope tonight's program has given you a pearl or two on how to take control of office systems and increase productivity while also scoring high marks on team and patient satisfaction.